Hello, my kindergarten friends. This is Miss Rachele here to read Mr. Seahorse by Eric Carle. Mr. and Mrs. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea. Mrs. Seahorse began to wiggle and twist this way and that way. "It's time for me to lay my eggs," said Mrs. Seahorse. "Can I help?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Oh, yes," said Mrs. Seahorse, and she laid her eggs into a pouch on Mr. Seahorse's belly. "I'll take good care of our eggs," said Mr. Seahorse. "I promise." As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a group of trumpet fish hidden in the reeds. They're camouflaged. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Stickleback?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Delighted," replied Mr. Stickleback. "I just built a nest, and right away Mrs. Stickleback laid her eggs into it. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch." "Keep up the good work," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a lionfish hidden in the coral reef. Can you see him? Watch. Camouflaged. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Tilapia?" asked Mr. Seahorse. But Mr. Tilapia could not answer. His mouth was full of eggs. I know," said Mr. Seahorse. "Mrs. Tilapia laid her eggs. Now you're taking good care of them until they hatch." Mr. Tilapia nodded his head. "You must be very happy," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a pair of leaf fish hidden in among the seaweed. Can you see them? They're camouflaged. There they are. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Curtis?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Perfectly fine," replied Mr. Curtis. "Mrs. Curtis laid her eggs, and I have stuck them on my head. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch." "You are doing a great job," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a stone fish hidden behind a rock. Can you see him? There he is. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Pipe?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Couldn't be better," replied Mr. Pipe. "Mrs. Pipe laid her eggs along my belly. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch." "You should be proud of yourself," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Bullhead?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Tip-top," replied Mr. Bullhead. "Mrs. Bullhead laid her eggs, and the eggs have hatched. Now I'm babysitting." "You are doing a fine job," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. The time had come for the Seahorse babies to be born. Mr. Seahorse wiggled and twisted this way and that. At last the babies tumbled from Mr. Seahorse's pouch and swam away. One baby turned around to come back to the pouch. "Oh no," said Mr. Seahorse. "I do love you, but now you're ready to be on your own." The end. I hope you enjoyed that fun book and seeing all those fun fish that were camouflaged. Have a great day.